The attic key hung around Malcolm Blackwood's neck like a noose. He'd worn it since 1842, the night his sister Gertrude stopped scratching at the door. He'd listened, frozen in the hallway as her whimpers faded into silence. Their father, Reverend Alistair Blackwood, had called it God's judgment. "The devil's mark is purged," he'd said, tossing the key into the hearth. But Malcolm fished it out, its teeth still flecked with the blood. Her blood. Over a century later, 16-year-old Daniel Cole traced the taxi window with its finger, watching rain slide like tears down the glass. The Highlands sprawled outside, a primordial tapestry of jagged cliffs and peat bogs swallowing the daylight. The driver, a grizzled man named Dougie, had stopped speaking miles back. When Daniel mentioned Blackwood Cottage, Dougie's knuckles whitened on the wheel. "Bad blood in that soil," he muttered, nodding to a roadside shrine, a cairn of stones crowned with wilted heather. "Folks vanish around there. Even the ravens didn't linger." Daniel didn't believe in ghosts. Not then. The cottage was a festering wound in the earth, lichen-crusted stone walls hunched under a sagging roof, ivy strangling the chimneys. The windows were eyes, clouded and unblinking. Moira stood in the doorway, her wool shawl clutched tight, as if the wind might steal her. "Welcome home," she said, her smile brittle. Malcolm loomed behind her, a specter in tweed, the key glinting beneath his collar. Daniel's room reeked of mothballs and damp. Above the fireplace hung the portrait, a girl with ink-drop eyes and a smile sharp enough to cut. Gertrude, aged 11. Her face followed him as he unpacked, her gaze lingering like a cold hand on his neck. That night, the scratching began. It started in the walls, a skittering of claws, then pooled into whispers. "Late. You're late." Daniel's breath fogged. The wardrobe door creaked open, revealing a darkness thicker than pitch. A giggle rippled through the air. "Malcolm promised you'd come, liar, liar, liar." He fled downstairs, where Moira sat knitting by the fire, her needles click, click, clicking like a beetle's legs. "It's just the wind," she said, but her gaze darted to the attic hatch. By dawn, Daniel's resolve hardened. He'd survived his mother's vacant stares, her trembling hands tearing at her hair as she whispered, "She's in the walls, Danny. The girl in the walls." He wouldn't cower now, but Blackwood Cottage breathed. The library was a crypt of leather and dust. Daniel found Gertrude's diary wedged behind a hymnal, its pages brittle as dead leaves. "Father says I'm wicked," she'd scrawled. "The shadows sing to me. They say I'll never leave." Later entries dissolved into frantic sketches, a music box, a locket, a door with no handle. The music box played at midnight. Daniel followed the melody, a lullaby warped into a dirge, to a room sealed with rotting planks. Inside, the walls bore tiny handprints, burned into the plaster. The music box sat on a nursery chair, its rosewood lid carved with thorns. "Hush now, darling. Close your eyes." Gertrude's voice oozed from the shadows. "He's coming." Malcolm found him there, pale as curdled milk. "Stay out of locked rooms," he growled. But Daniel saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear that had festered for 160 years. In the village of Drumbeg, the air soured when Daniel mentioned Blackwood. The pub owner spat into his pint. "Cursed that lot. Sacrificed bairns to keep their land rich. Even the witch Alice Blackwood didn't stoop so low." Alice, drowned in Loch Ness in 1623, her ghost said to herd travelers into the mist. Elspeth MacLeod, the archivist, slid him a rowan wood cross. "Gertrude's not the one you should fear. It's the house, it feeds on guilt." Her words gnawed at him as he trudged back, the cross burning his pocket. That night, Daniel sleepwalked. He woke knee-deep in the garden, mud caked under his nails, the taste of soil on his tongue. A doll's head grinned up at him, its porcelain face cracked. The same doll from Gertrude's portrait. Moira screamed when he brought it inside. "Burn it," she begged, but Malcolm hurled it into the hearth. Flames roared green. Gertrude's laughter echoed in the chimney. The accidents began in earnest. Malcolm's cane snapped mid-step, sending him tumbling. Moira choked on a fishbone, her face purpling until Daniel struck her back, dislodging a tarnished locket. Gertrude's locket. Inside, a portrait of Malcolm as a boy. "Forgive me," scrawled on the reverse. "She wants vengeance," Moira wept, "for what we did." What they'd done was this. In 1952, newlyweds Malcolm and Moira burned Gertrude's toys, her clothes, her letters. "Cleanse the house," the village priest urged. But that night, their firstborn, Alistair, suffocated in his crib. The midwife found his sheets knotted like a noose. Daniel's nightmare sharpened. He saw Gertrude's corpse in the attic, chained to the wall, her fingernails clawed to stubs. Saw Malcolm, age 10, slipping barley cakes under the door as she sobbed. "Please, Mal, it's dark, it's so dark." Saw their father's sermons twist into raving condemnation. "The devil's bride! Burn her!" But Gertrude wasn't the monster. The house was. Its hunger pulsed in the walls. A living thing fed on Blackwood's shame. Daniel felt it in his bones. The same rot that hollowed his mother, that drove her to scream at empty corners. The ritual required blood. Malcolm's grimoire, passed down from Alice herself, lay open on the kitchen table. "We'll bind her to the attic," he said, but his hands shook. "It's the only way." Fiona Craig, the housekeeper, stepped forward. Malcolm's bastard daughter, her face a roadmap of resentment. "I'll do it." They drew the circle in salt and ash. Malcolm chanted, the Gaelic words barbed. "Thami gorta sha dut adol erfalv." Gertrude struck at midnight. Fiona's body levitated, her spine arching like a bowstring. "Brother," she rasped, black tears streaming. "You ate her. You grew strong on her bones." The truth unfolded like a knife. After Gertrude's death, Reverend Blackwood had boiled her remains into a broth to keep the devil at bay. Malcolm drank it. They all did. The house roared, walls bleeding mold. Daniel's reflection in the shattered mirror grinned. Old, too old, his hair white, his eyes hollow. Gertrude materialized, her hand cold in his. "You see me," she whispered. "Break the chain." In the attic, her skeleton hung in rusted chains. Daniel pried the locket from her ribs, the metal searing his palm. "Forgive me." Malcolm's key fit the lock. Daniel turned it. The house screamed. Gertrude's bones crumbled to ash. The walls buckled, the roof collapsing inward. Moira's wail cut short as beams crushed her. Malcolm met Daniel's gaze, nodding once, before the floor swallowed him whole. Daniel stumbled into the dawn, the cottage a smoldering tomb at his back. The locket throbbed in his fist, frost spreading up his arm. Years later, he returned. The ruins whispered as he approached, the air thick with peat and decay. His daughter, Lila, clung to his hand. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing to the attic window. A girl in white waved, her smile warm, her eyes finally at peace. Daniel squeezed Lila's hand. "A friend."